Welcome to the First Property Buyer Show, your go-to podcast for expert advice, market insights, and real-life stories to help you buy your first home with confidence.
Hello and welcome to the First Property Buyer Show, the podcast that is with you every step of the way during your property journey. I'm Emilie Lauer, journalist here at Momentum Media, and today we are joined by Robert Dougherty, who is going to share with us his property journey, including all the mistakes and lessons he learned during the process.
Hopefully not too many mistakes, though.
Hopefully not too many mistakes. Rob, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks very much for having me.
And look, your journey is a tiny bit different from the other first home buyers we've had on the pod because you went down to the renovation path. Now, I want to ask you from the get-go, what inspired you to go through the reno path? And is it something you've always wanted, or is that something you had to go along the way because you couldn't find what you were looking for?
It's a good question. And it occurred to me just before we sort of came into this podcast that perhaps this was subconsciously ingrained at some point. I remember, when I was growing up as a kid, my parents were interested in renovations, and my mum in particular said her motto was always, "You don't buy the best house in the best street or the best house in the worst street. You buy the worst house in the best street, and then you basically renovate." And so you're in a good area, your value goes up, and along the way you renovate a bit more. Maybe buy another house somewhere else, renovate it. Yeah.
So you basically grew up on that renovation path then?
Yeah. And I was lucky to meet someone as well, my partner Megan, that her family was also interested in renovation. So it almost became, I guess, inevitable that we would go down this path.
That is quite interesting because you would think that you need to have, all the skills to be able to do the reno. Was that your case, or are you like just a Sunday type of guy reno?
There's a certain amount of practicalness that does come with renos, but we knew people that we had family members who were familiar with different parts of renovation. Obviously, both sides of our parents are familiar with renovation. We'd both been in households that were actively renovating. Now, there is a difference between when you do it professionally. When you professionally build a house, you need to be certified for your electrics, your plumbing, those sort of things you can't change. But there are things that you can change. So we were talking before the podcast about regrouting a shower. That is something that you can go down to Bunnings, not that we're sponsored by Bunnings, but you can go down to Bunnings and you can get grout, and you can dig out the old grout from your pre-2000s shower, and you can regrout it yourself in a couple of days.
And look, on social media, we are seeing, I should say, all the DIY, all the do-it-yourself, all the reno, bringing a lot of interest, on socials, and many people are looking to go down that road also, which is why you're coming in.
I think we're at that point in time where the younger families, and I don't, I'm not one of those people that has that family. I don't have kids or anything, but there are people that know that it's going to be a bit harder to get a brand new house. Those housing developments, they are kind of expensive, and that happened on our journey as well. And maybe it is a bit affordable to buy a bit further out of town or an older house and do your research and know what you're in for, but maybe make little changes along the way.
Well, let's rewind a little bit and let's go to the beginning of your property journey. So when did you start that journey and where did you end up buying?
So I think we were already sort of talking about looking for a place in sort of 2022. 2023, I think, is when we really started to kind of knuckle down and say, let's do this, because, we just come out of COVID. People had bought property during COVID, but we weren't one of them. And so there was time where people could work on their houses. And one of the best things we did, and this was an idea from my partner, was that we had an Excel spreadsheet. So just a Microsoft Excel with the houses that we liked. We had their street name, their address, the price, how far for each of us for work, because that was a factor we're interested in.
Definitely.
The bedrooms, the bathrooms, the car spaces. And then I think we ended up with a list of maybe, it might have been as many as 50 properties.
Oh, wow.
Which were, and not all of those we weren't interested in all of those, but we went back through that list and, gathered this list and went back through it and said, these are the 5 properties that I like the most. And then you go to your partner and you say, these are the 5 properties that you like the most. Let's go and look at them. And that's really kind of nail down which ones work for us, which ones are the right distance from work, which ones have what we need, basically.
So how long did that process take you from the moment you really started looking and made that Excel spreadsheet to the moment you bought your house?
I think it would have been probably about a year, full year. Yeah.
It's quite intense, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, people spend years looking for the right house, but I guess we're motivated by the fact that there was economic factors. We were both had new jobs, and so we wanted to be in a place where we could kind of set up and really be established. Yeah.
Fantastic. So where did you end up buying?
So, and this is going to sound crazy because we were in Sydney and we decided to buy out in the Blue Mountains out near Lithgow.
Okay.
Which is a long way out.
That's very long. So how many areas did you actually look, how many suburbs did you first look at before you decided to move to the Blue Mountains?
Well, originally it's quite interesting. We were living in Bargo, which is down near Campbelltown, in sort of out of Sydney, and that area is primarily it was a rural zoned area, but it's becoming more of a developer housing area. So that area was very quickly priced out of our budget. We were looking around there and we just couldn't find something that was in our budget. We started to look further south because, if you go further south, maybe it's cheaper. We started to look west of Sydney because that might have been more in our budget. And we started to look north of Sydney, so places like Gosford. I think even we never went there, but we looked at a few properties in Newcastle even. I said,
wow.
Well, can we do that by train actually? If I'm in the city here at North Sydney office, can I get from Newcastle to North Sydney? And so we were looking at sort of the further areas out. Now, this is not something that's going to work for everyone, but we pretty quickly decided that we weren't that interested in having an apartment or a townhouse. We wanted a little bit of acreage, which is what we ended up with. But to be able to afford that, we needed to look outside Sydney. Yeah.
So how is the life in the Blue Mountains now?
It's very nice. It's a long train trip, and I took the train in, but just sort of leaving the city behind, there is a little bit of space for us there. We have a few cows, a few sheep, and a few goats, and we've got our 2 dogs, and so there's a bit of life there. It's not the nightclub life. It's not going out to the pub every night, but it is really nice. Yeah, and I think that's what we were going for.
How many bedrooms do you have?
We have a 1 master, and we have two spare bedrooms, but one is kind of, we're still renovating, so it's kind of a storage area. Yeah.
I'm moving in, Rob. I want the cows, the sheep, and the dogs. Yeah.
Well, you have to move in with like all the boxes. We've still got boxes of stuff.
That's all right.
Yeah.
So look, that's quite interesting that you ended up moving, further where that's what you anticipated. I think, for many people, like they have their heart set in an area. How do you get, over the fact that you can't stay in your desired area and you have to move further away? Yeah,
I see what you mean. I mean, we've got a lot of friends where they bought a house a few streets away from their parents' house, and they're in the same suburb because they know that suburb, they know the shops, they know the places, they know the people there.
Yeah.
They went to school there. And I think my partner and I were fairly lucky in that we had travelled previously. I'm originally from Western Australia, so Sydney was not my first home. And my partner originally from South Africa, so Australia was not her first home.
Yeah.
And so it was easy to say, we don't need to be bound to, to a particular suburb. And I think that's probably something that maybe first-time buyers are going to have to kind of get a bit used to, because Sydney, we found the process. Sydney is a hard place to buy into.
Definitely.
There's a lot of competition. We would go to home opens and there would be 20 or 30 people there. And this is kind of, I would say, fairly quiet period when we're looking. And yeah, it is very competitive.
It does. I'm in the process myself to buy in Sydney because we kind of don't want to go that far away.
Mm-hmm.
We're not at the stage of our life where we can go that far yet. At least we don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the competition here, it's nerve-wracking.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely is nerve-wracking. Now, let's go into your house buying process.
Mm-hmm.
So you said that you've always known that you wanted to do reno. So how different it is to look at house for renovation than normal houses or normal finished products, let's say. What do you need to be aware of? What do you need to be careful about when you want to buy that property?
Okay. I think this is something we picked up from my partner's parents, but there's definitely key issues you kind of have to avoid, right? Like when you're looking at a renovation, some of these houses are going to be a bit older, and there's I guess in dating it would be called like red flag. Like there's your red flag.
Yeah.
It's like, so anything to do with kind of termites is a little bit of a red flag, because that sort of replacement of your supportive materials, it's very expensive.
It is.
And I think that goes through to, termites, but also water damage was one of the key issues we highlighted. If you have, your support structure is water damaged, that can be expensive. And so you kind of have to be aware of that. Some other things is just the big purchases. And I'm not talking about your TV or fridge. I'm talking about your roof. If the roof hasn't been replaced on the property in, 30 or 40 years, then that's a big expense. And that might not be today, but that could be 10 years down the track.
Yeah.
And so the place that we ended up with, we looked at it, and the roof had only been replaced fairly recently. We said, that's a big tick. That's just an expense we don't have to pay for. And in our particular case, one of the other big expenses was the fencing around the property. So it's more of an acreage. And so that sort of fencing, it can be tens of thousands of dollars. And so we were lucky that our perimeter fences were quite good.
So yeah, you need to be careful about what you need to repair later down the road.
Yeah.
If you have those kind of repair to make, how do you factor this into the price you're offering for the property, into your negotiation tactics?
I think this is more of a nuanced thing, and it's more of a case by case, because some people are willing to budge on price. In our particular case, we went to see the house and went 3 or 4 times actually, which I'm not sure if that's unusual or not. That certainly seemed
Sounds pretty
standard.
fair if you've got the time.
Yeah, and we had a fairly good rapport with the seller, and also their real estate agent as well. And so I felt that we were able to talk frankly with them about some of the limitations there. They obviously, the roof was a selling point for them, but there were going to be other things maintenance-wise that were an issue. So I don't know if I can help you more about that, but maybe just developing a bit of rapport and just saying, putting your foot down if you don't think something is up to scratch. I think that's an important thing to say, and just being, I guess, more direct. Yeah.
More direct, yeah. Great. So what did you end up renovating in your house?
Well, we had a lot of help. We took about 2 months off.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So a lot of time, saved up leave. My partner and I saved up leave. We had help from some of our family as well, and made some big changes in terms of the kitchen. We'd removed a lot of the cabinets, all of the cabinetry. Some of these older houses have basically a cornered off kitchen. And so they might have a specific room that is for the kitchen, and then that you come out of that kitchen and there's a bit more of a lounge. And in our case, that was one of those. And so that middle dividing wall, we had that assessed for where the supporting beams were, and when we found those, we basically took out the rest and left the supporting beams as far back as we could to keep the structural integrity, but opened the rest out as a kitchen,
An open plan, yeah.
open plan kitchen. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I wonder if in 10 years or 20 years, maybe open plan kitchens won't be as trendy as they are now, and everyone will go back to closed kitchens.
Hey, we'll see in 10 years. But look, I think, and that's something that I found very important, especially when you buy your first house as owner-occupier, because you're going to live inside for at least the next 10 years, it needs to be appealing to you rather than what you can sell it for in the future.
We were quite lucky to have a bit of help with that as well. You know what, a bit of the flooring. You know, the flooring nowadays you can get flooring that basically slots into one another. They connect, and so you can take out the old flooring, which is what we did, and you can get new flooring, and they basically connect in, and you place it on the floor and hammer it in, and there's an underlay.
So you did everything by yourself and with your family and partner?
Yeah. Plus, of course, the other parts you have to have done are, importantly, your electrics and your water. So you're legally required to have another authorised person for those. So definitely do not do that yourself. That's super dangerous.
So would you say that you need to have those skills beforehand before you do reno, or would you say that anybody can do reno if they're very motivated and willing to work?
There are parts you can do by yourself. So as I mentioned, grouting, those sort of simpler jobs. Now I think the difference in the way that we did it was we took that time off and tried to get as much done as we could in the amount we had. And there are still things unfinished down our house. You know, the skirting board still needs to be basically put onto the wall. Affixed to the wall with a nail gun and things, and painted. But there are things you can do. I think probably the flooring is probably something you could probably do by yourself. But takes a little while. Grouting, that's a goer I think as well. But yeah, it's a case by case. Most of the time when I see renos and I talk to people about renos, it's a 10-year process. You know, they start with a few things and you get skills as you go. And obviously we were a bit of an outlier in that we had a little bit of help from people that had done renos their whole lives, but we could get it done in as short a time as possible.
Yeah, because that's the risk, I guess. You know, if you start, only on the weekend, it takes way longer to get it done.
Some of the best advice I was given in regards to renovations from my father-in-law is that do it sort of throughout the week, in your after you get home from work, because you want to leave your weekends free to have as free time. Otherwise, you'll just get sick of living in your own house. And so we do try to take that to heart.
That's a really good advice, actually.
Yeah.
So how long has the reno process been going on for?
We're just over a year now, I think. Yeah. But most of the work was done within the first couple of months. Yeah.
So what is left to do now?
I think definitely I mentioned the skirting that needs to be done. We've just had some installers come in and put in an extractor fan, and what else? Painting of skirting boards. There's potentially some bathroom work to do because it's a two bathroom. So there's an ensuite bathroom that is basically the same as when we bought the house.
Okay.
And so there's a few little things, and of course those things like the last minute things. So you're putting up paintings and your decorations and buying a couch. We don't have any of that yet.
Okay.
But we need to do that.
You need to buy a couch. Yeah. How old is your house, if you don't mind me asking?
To be honest, I was thinking about it before the podcast, and I'm not 100% sure, but I know that it would be sort of that pre-2000s,
Pre-2000, yeah, right,
yeah.
Very vague.
Yes, yeah. I'm not 100% sure about that.
What were some of the biggest challenges you faced during that renovation process?
Challenges. There's definitely, this is more of an embarrassing one. I don't know if I should say it. I'll say it. So when you're painting, right, you you're painting walls, and then we went with the cream color, and the advice we're given for painting was, you're using a roller and things, and not to load up, your roller too much, because you'll end up with drips of paint and when that dries, it looks terrible. Anyway, so that was the advice I was given, and I didn't always stick to that advice, and so we have a few little paint drops. Yeah, but
easily
you can sand them
fixable,
back.
yeah.
You can sand them back, but yeah, it is one of those things that kind of came back to haunt me, I guess. Yeah.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
that's so cute, I think.
But I mean, some of the other challenges is just, I guess, seeing it through. You kind of have to have a big work ethic, and we were lucky that we had people there to sort of help us and say, you can do this.
Yeah.
It's just this 2-month section of pretty hard work.
Yeah.
And if you push through that, you'll have a great result.
And I think it's for you. At the end of the day, it's for you and your family and your partner.
Yeah.
And it's going to be your house, your home. So I think the advantage of doing reno is you made it to your liking from the get-go.
Yes. Yeah. You definitely get to choose what you want. And we even ended up with a bit of a sort of a tiled feature wall, and I just every time I walk in, I see that, I think that is exceptionally cool.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like this. Now, you mentioned something earlier on, and it's that for some of the work you need to do in a renovation, you need to have specific people, specific tradies coming in for legal reason. Now,
And
it's
safety as well.
Safety,
yeah.
Look, now it's a little bit of a controversial one, but there's a lot of good tradies and there's a lot of crappy tradies. How do you do your due diligence to make sure that you're choosing the right person that is going to do a great job?
That does feel like a minefield, and something I've not had a lot of experience with working with tradies. I think that some of the ways as a first home buyer, it's your first place, you've just bought, there are some things you can do. And so when you're looking at things like your fittings, so your kitchen sink and things like that, it is worth your time to shop around and maybe even go to these commercial supply places where they have sinks, which is what we ended up doing, and say, well, I want this one. See if you can get a good price for it, and then say, well, and then you go and phone your tradie and say, well, this is the sink I want to put in. Do a bit of that planning beforehand to kind of not get just what's recommended, just off plan sort of thing, I guess. Yeah. In terms of, having tradies work on your house, I think most of the time we kind of organised it that we would have someone home in case things came up or there was a potential problem, not to hover over their shoulder, but just to be available, just to say, well, do you need, the breakers turned off or whatever, or how can I kind of speed this process along or help out where possible? We had an exhaust fan put in, which I said earlier, and there was some complications from that. There was a little bit of water damage that came through from that. And so that is actually something that I now have to go follow up on and get the tradespeople back in and have that area of ceiling recut because, there was a bit of water damage from it. Yeah. So
How are you going to manage
it is a
that?
minefield. Yeah.
How are you going to manage that? Like, are they, responsive enough or?
Yeah. I think most tradespeople, when you outline the problem and say, well, we're not happy about this, I think most tradespeople are pretty good. I mean, we definitely, when we were looking, at certain tradespeople to come in, you kind of look for a range, look for a few different quotes. I generally would rather go local.
Yeah.
But sometimes you can't. Sometimes, based on quoted price and things like that, it's not always possible to do that. Yeah.
So shop around.
Yeah, shop around, basically.
Shop around.
I mean, it's common sense, right? Yeah.
What are some of the good surprise you had during your home renovation?
There was one. So I ripped out our kitchen cabinets. And so these are basically, if you've done renos, they're not really secured. they're kind of just, a lot of them are wood board and they have hollow spaces underneath. And so when I was pulling out these kitchen cabinets, there was things underneath the kitchen cabinets, like mementos from past lives of the house. And so I remember finding a photograph, an old photograph of someone's yacht, and a few people sitting on the yacht, smiling and waving, and it was just one of those white sailing yachts, and I went, wow, this is really cool. That's a part of this house that obviously someone left behind. And then you have probably one of the funniest ones was an old McDonald's brochure. So this is one of those ones, the little
the leaflet,
the specials, the specials leaflet. That's the one. And I don't know if they still do them, but
I don't even think so. Everything is online at the moment.
This one was from 2000, I think.
Oh wow!
And there was a moment where I found it where I was like, wow, maybe we should get this thing framed. It's kind of cool because it had all the old prices. You could get a burger for 30 cents or something like that, or $1 or something. And yeah, it was amazing. It was kind of like a little time capsule. So
I like that.
Cool.
I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's like the house has history. And I think we tend to forget that. But the house was there before us in some cases. And will most likely even sometimes be there after us.
Well, if you're buying a reno, chances are the house has had 3 or 4 different owners, maybe 2 or 3 different owners. Yeah, so, because it's not built, in a development site, a couple of weeks ago or a month ago. It has a bit of history.
I love that.
Yeah,
reminds me of Europe, but yeah. What do you love the most about your house now?
Oh, there was a really nice. So there was a wood bench that was put in, and it's not a common one. It's more of a waterfall, so it has a flat top, and then it waterfalls down to the ground for the kitchen bench. And this is something my father-in-law helped with, and it is beautiful. It is very, very cool. Yeah.
You do love your house, do you?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. It's really
and I
good.
think that's nice because when you buy, and especially as your first property, I think that's also one of the things that people keep on telling you, oh, it's your first property, it's not your forever home. But if you really do like your property, it makes it even more special.
I think it's quite funny actually you mentioned that because at the end of that sort of point where a lot of this stuff was done, one of our family members said, well, now this is sort of done, maybe we should sell it again and renovate somewhere else. And I'm like, I think my partner and I looked at each other and were like, we are never renovating again after this.
So you're going to break the family tradition?
No, I mean, I don't know. I can see it either way, but it's a lot of work. There's work there. I'm not always the best at doing the work, but, you have to do it. You just have to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Which leads me to my next question. What are some of your top advice for first home buyers that are considering reno?
Ooh. I mean, part of that original, when we were looking at different properties, and Sydney is it can be odd when you're searching for a property and we were looking at sort of houses that weren't new. And so a lot of your new houses have development approval, right? I mean, they have to.
They have to, yeah.
Yeah. That's not always the case when you look at renovating properties. Like we went to a few different houses, spoke to the real estate agent, everything seemed fine. Go to the property, we're doing a bit of a tour of the property and we're noticing things. Like we're noticing one of the places had a veranda with pillars, right? This pillar was held on to a nearby tree by a snatch strap, like a four-wheel drive recovery tool. And we're thinking, this is a bit odd, And I asked the real estate agent at the time, I said, this has development approval, doesn't it? He said, no development approval. Basically, you're accepting the risk. You're buying into something that you might not be able to sell down the line because it never had original development approval. And so that's a risk you run with older houses. It's not a common thing, but just to have that as a problem is crazy, right? It's such a weird thing to have. Some of the other things to consider, I mean, older houses, definitely look at your termites, get your termite inspections done because that's such a big thing. Water damage, as I said before, is kind of a big deal. These are some of the things you kind of learn along the way, and we're lucky we had other people to advise us on that as well. Yeah.
How do you find that mentorship outside of your family if you don't have family over there?
Ooh, that's a hard one. I don't know if there is for renovations. I mean, there's certainly a lot of YouTube videos out there of renovating, and we used a few of them, but in terms of organisations, there probably is, but I'm just not aware of them.
Well, this podcast,
Maybe.
I think it's a good solution.
Yeah,
Here we
that
go.
could be it. That's the venture.
Looking back, were there things you would have done differently?
Things I would have done differently. There was. It was. I'm not sure that there would have been too many things I would have done differently. I'm going to throw it out there. There was a bit of a traumatic experience along the way. No one's injured.
Okay.
But one of the first houses that we kind of really fell in love with. This place was near where we are now. It was within price range. The house, I was not as enthused about the house, but my partner loved the house. I liked the property a lot. Like, it was a bit bigger. I think it was a bit bigger than our current one. Beautiful lawns, had a fruit tree there. What's not to like? It had a little bit of a view as well. And so we kind of said, yeah, this is the one. And I remember we put an offer in on the Friday, and we shook the hand of the real estate agent. And that was a moment where we're like, this is it. We've done it. We completed the dream, you know.
Celebration time.
Yeah. Well, we did. We went out for dinner the next night to celebrate. Had a few beers, etc. Had something to eat. And then on the Monday morning, I can't remember if it was a text or a call or an email, but it was a communique from the real estate agent to say that another offer had come through on the weekend, and they had decided to take the other offer.
So they didn't even give you a chance to negotiate again?
No, it was over.
Oh,
Deal done.
that is mad.
Mm-hmm. And I can tell you right now, that was, I had always kind of held out that, you know, I'd received some advice from my family that you never take it for granted to think that you've got the house until you're standing in it, you know, with sort of your ownership paperwork. Never take it for granted. But that was a hard lesson to learn. You know, that week was pretty awful.
That's painful, yeah.
Yeah.
Your partner must have been devastated.
Devastated, yeah. Yeah.
I think it's very hard to come back because you do get attached to those property, and everybody is like, yeah, you shouldn't get attached. You shouldn't get attached. You do. Like, there's no way that you cannot get attached because you see yourself living there. So you're already starting to make plans during the first visit.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to not get attached to it.
We've been there 2 or 3 times, I think. Yeah.
How did you bounce back?
I remember it took a long time to surprisingly open up that Excel spreadsheet again and be like, well, what were the other 4 that we were going to look at? You know, but it still took a month to do that.
And you're risking the risk that they're gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, because look, I don't know back when you were buying, but now the market's very hot. Like, properties, they go and they're gone in not even weeks.
That did happen when we were looking. Sometimes stuff was on the list for a day and then it was gone.
Yeah.
I remember signing up to, you know, a few sort of text message alerts on pricing and things like that through real estate agents that we knew and that knew us, and I still get those text messages, but yeah, they're fast. You know, stuff is gone sometimes, and I don't think there was any that I can think of that was better than the one we're in now. And I think it took a while for us to realize that the one we bought now, it actually turned out to be a blessing that we didn't get that first one.
Look, everything happens for a reason at the end of the day.
Yeah.
what is meant to be is meant to be. I'm a true believer on
It's
this
fate
one.
or something maybe.
Yeah, look, I think, at the end of the day, everything happens for a reason. And if you didn't get that one, maybe it's because something better was waiting for you around the corner. And I think that's one way, at least for me, it's a way to see it, to not be too disappointed.
I think it's probably just because the other people offered more cash.
Yeah, true. But look, that is also something you need to take into consideration because you're doing reno. You have to budget for your renovation. So you can't offer the full amount of cash for the property itself because you know that you've got those extra costs coming up down the way.
Yes. Yeah.
How did you guys budget for this?
So originally we put together a figure. We're both relatively educated people, professional careers, and we still struggled. I don't know what that says about the Sydney real estate market, but when we put it together, we went through expenses and our salaries, and we put it all together, and we said, this is our upper budget. This is like how far we're willing to go. To the extreme, to live on cans of baked beans for the next 15 years. And we're like, we don't want to go there, right? But you kind of have to budget for that anyway in case the right one comes up. And then, then we went to sort of a comfortable budget of we could afford to do this. And we could afford to live kind of relatively well and maybe do a few of those renovations and have our set price. And anything sort of around that price or below that was a goer. And I think I don't want to put any specific numbers on it, but what we went with in the end was around that second one, luckily, rather than the
top end of your budget.
Picking grass out on the sidewalk sort of thing and eating it. No.
Look, you can always eat pasta.
Yeah, pasta's cheap. Bulk pasta, yeah.
But yeah. Rob, thank you so much for your time today. Any last word?
I think I'll just say, my last words would be, first-time buyers, people know that it can be a struggle, and there is help out there, and you kind of have to ask for the help. It's a reality now that it's too hard to go at it alone. Our parents and their parents, went and sort of made their own place and built their own house. I recall my grandfather built his own house from a Women's Weekly catalogue. He had this design from Women's Week and built it, and you just can't do that anymore. There's regulations about what you can and can't do, and I just want to say, just hang in there. It gets better. We're at the stage now where we can live in a house. There's still renovations to do, but we're kind of like, we can live here, and I can tolerate the skirting boards being up against the wall rather than on the wall. Yeah, yeah. So, just hang in there, I guess. Yeah, and I think as well, I'm originally from sort of rural WA, and so I had that country experience, and I would say to young people that are sort of in their first home buyer stage, don't be afraid to look outside the city. The city is, even though it feels like everything, at least to me, it's not the be all end all. It's a nice place to work, and they have really great salaries. Thank you, Momentum Media. But I know now that I don't have to live in the city. I'm happy enough where I am. Yeah.
Great. So wise words to end the pod.
I hope that was wise. It didn't sound that wise, but.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on the first Property Buyer Show. And we will be back very, very soon with another episode for more tips and tricks for your property journey. Bye for now.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.